What happens when America's top military surgeon discovers her emergency operation isn't about saving a life, but ending the one witness who could expose a massive conspiracy? Dr. Elena Reeves had never refused a patient, until the night she looked at the chart and saw the truth her superiors were hiding. This is the story of a doctor who chose her oath over her orders and paid the ultimate price. If you want to know what happened when she walked away from the operating table, hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next will change everything you think you know about military medicine, loyalty, and the cost of doing what's right. The surgeon who refused to operate and exposed a $50 billion medical conspiracy. The call came at 0247 hours. Dr. Elena Reeves was already awake. Sleep had become a stranger over the past 20 years, abandoning her somewhere between her second deployment and her 100th trauma surgery. She sat in the darkness of her quarters at Ramstein Air Base, a cup of cold coffee in her hands, watching the German night through her window. Her phone lit up the room like an explosion. The screen showed three words that made her stomach clench: Priority 1 surgical. Priority 1 meant someone was dying. Priority 1 meant every second counted. Priority 1 meant she had minutes, not hours, to save a life that the United States Air Force had decided was worth saving. She was dressed and moving before the second ring. The base hospital rose against the night sky like a fortress of glass and steel. Elena had walked these corridors for 6 years, had saved lives in operating rooms that looked like something from a science fiction film, had held the hands of 19-year-old airmen as they died from wounds that no amount of training could prepare you to see. She knew every inch of this building, every shortcut, every stairwell, every door that led to every room where miracles happened or didn't happen depending on skill and luck, and the cruel mathematics of trauma. But she had never been summoned like this, not in the middle of the night with no advance notice, no patient information, no medical history waiting in the system. The surgical wing was lit up like daylight. Security personnel stood at every entrance, stone-faced men with sidearms, and the kind of alertness that came from knowing something important was happening. They checked her ID 3 times before letting her through. Colonel Sarah Morrison was waiting in the scrub room. Elena had worked with Morrison for 4 years. They were not friends. Friendship required trust, and trust required transparency. And Morrison was about as transparent as a concrete wall. She was the director of medical services, a political position that involved more bureaucracy than medicine, more paperwork than patience. But she wore surgical scrubs tonight. That was unusual. Morrison's face was carved from stone. No emotion, no warmth, just the cold efficiency of someone delivering orders. Dr. Reeves, thank you for responding so quickly. Elena moved to the sink and began scrubbing. The ritual was automatic. Soap water friction. Remove every microorganism that could kill a patient. 20 years of muscle memory. What's the case? Elena asked. High-value patient. Classified identity. Aviation accident, approximately 6 hours ago. Multiple internal injuries. Significant blood loss. Unstable vital signs. Elena's hands kept moving. Scrub, rinse, repeat. Why wasn't I notified 6 hours ago? Why are we just now getting him into surgery? Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The patient was being transported from a secure location. There were delays in the medevac. By the time he arrived, his condition had deteriorated significantly. Something in the explanation felt wrong. 6 hours was a lifetime in trauma medicine. 6 hours meant complications that could have been prevented. 6 hours meant someone had made a decision to delay treatment. What's his current status? BP 70/40, heart rate 130, oxygen saturation 82%. He's intubated and sedated. Labs show significant internal bleeding. We need to get in there now. Elena dried her hands and pushed through the doors into the operating room. The patient was already on the table, draped and prepped. Only his torso was visible, the rest of him hidden beneath blue surgical sheets. The anesthesiologist stood at the head of the table, monitoring equipment that beeped and hissed and tracked the thin line between life and death. Elena approached the table and looked at the monitors. The numbers confirmed what Morrison had said. This man was dying. Without immediate intervention, he would be dead within the hour. Chart, Elena said to the surgical nurse. The nurse handed her a tablet. Elena scrolled through the information, her trained eye catching details that most people would miss. Patient designation, V, IP7. No name, no service record, just a number. Injury pattern, blunt force trauma to the chest and abdomen, consistent with high-impact collision. Estimated time of injury, 6 hours 14 minutes prior to current time. But something didn't match. Elena looked at the patient's exposed skin, at the pattern of bruising, at the way the tissue had swollen and discolored. Blunt force trauma from an aviation accident created a specific pattern. She had seen it dozens of times. The violent deceleration, the impact against harness straps and equipment, the secondary injuries from debris and fire. This wasn't that pattern. The bruising was too uniform, too symmetrical. The kind of bruising that came from sustained pressure, not sudden impact. And there was something else. A small mark on the patient's upper arm, barely visible. The kind of mark that came from an IV needle inserted by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Elena's pulse quickened. "Colonel Morrison," she said carefully, "I need to see the full medical history. Where was this patient before the medevac? What treatment did he receive on site?" Morrison had moved to the opposite side of the table. Her eyes were unreadable above her surgical mask. "The treatment was minimal, field stabilization only. We don't have detailed records from the recovery site due to the classified nature of the operation." Elena set down the tablet and looked directly at her superior officer. "This patient wasn't in an aviation accident." The room went very quiet. Even the monitors seemed to pause in their beeping. Morrison's voice was ice. "Excuse me. The injury pattern is wrong. The bruising is inconsistent with impact trauma, and someone inserted a peripheral IV line before the medevac. Field medics don't have time for careful IV placement in a critical trauma situation. They use intraosseous lines or central access. This was done by someone with time and precision." Morrison didn't blink. "Your job is to operate, doctor, not to investigate the circumstances of injury. This patient is bleeding out. Are you going to save his life, or are you going to stand there asking questions?" It was a direct challenge, a line drawn in the surgical suite floor. Elena looked at the monitors again, at the man dying on the table in front of her, at the numbers that kept dropping, kept spiraling towards zero. She made a decision. "I need to run additional blood work before we proceed. Something is wrong here, and I need to know what we're dealing with." "We don't have time for additional tests. We don't have time not to. If this patient has been poisoned or exposed to a chemical agent, opening him up could make things worse. I need a full toxicology panel." Morrison's hands clenched into fists. "That is not necessary. You have your orders, doctor. Begin the operation." Elena pulled down her mask so Morrison could see her face, could see that she was not backing down. "With respect, Colonel, I don't take orders that compromise patient care. Something is very wrong with this case, and I'm not putting a scalpel into this man until I know what I'm dealing with." For a long moment, the two women stared at each other across the dying patient. The monitors continued their countdown. BP 68 over 38, heart rate 142, oxygen saturation 80%. Then Morrison did something that confirmed every suspicion Elena had. She smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had expected resistance and had prepared for it. "Very well, doctor. Run your tests. But understand something. This patient's survival is essential to national security. If he dies because you delayed treatment with unnecessary procedures, that will be noted in your record. That will end your career. That will follow you for the rest of your life." It was a threat, clear and direct. Elena had been threatened before. By insurgents in Iraq, by wounded soldiers who didn't want to be sedated, by grief-stricken family members who needed someone to blame when medicine failed and miracles didn't happen. But she had never been threatened by a superior officer in an operating room. "Draw the blood," Elena said to the nurse. "Full tox screen. Rush it to the lab and tell them I need results in 15 minutes. The nurse looked at Morrison. Morrison gave the smallest nod. Blood was drawn. Samples were rushed away. The clock on the wall marked the passage of minutes that this patient didn't have. Elena used the time to examine the patient more carefully. She lifted the surgical drape slightly and looked at the exposed abdomen. The swelling was significant. Internal bleeding certainly. But the pattern was still wrong. She looked at the small puncture mark on his arm again, studied it under the surgical lights. It was recent. within the last 12 hours, and it was placed with precision in the median cubital vein, the preferred site for IV insertion, when you had time to find the best access point. Did the patient regain consciousness at any point during transport? Elena asked the anesthesiologist. The anesthesiologist was a captain Elena had worked with many times, a competent physician who took his job seriously. Not that I'm aware of, doctor. He was already sedated when he arrived. Deep sedation, almost too deep for the level of injury. Almost too deep. Elena's mind was racing now, pieces fitting together in a pattern that made her blood run cold. Deep sedation that wasn't medically necessary. An IV line placed with care and precision. Injuries that didn't match the reported cause. A 6-hour delay before treatment. A classified patient with no name and no history, and a superior officer who was very, very insistent that Elena operate immediately without asking questions. The lab results came back in 12 minutes. Elena read them once, then read them again to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Elevated levels of digoxin, significantly elevated. Digoxin was a cardiac medication. In proper doses, it helped regulate heart rhythm. In excessive doses, it was poison. It caused arrhythmias, confusion, nausea, and in high enough concentrations, cardiac arrest. This patient had enough digoxin in his system to kill him, and it hadn't come from an aviation accident. Elena looked up at Morrison. The colonel was watching her with eyes that revealed nothing. He's been poisoned, Elena said quietly. Someone gave him a massive dose of digoxin. That's why his heart is failing. That's why his BP is tanking. Not because of internal bleeding, because of cardiac toxicity. Morrison's expression didn't change. Then treat the toxicity and proceed with the surgery. Colonel, this changes everything. This patient didn't crash in an aircraft. Someone tried to kill him with a drug overdose. That's not a medical emergency, that's a crime. We need to notify the authorities. We need to preserve evidence. We need to save his life. Morrison's voice was sharp as a scalpel. Whatever happened to this patient before he arrived here is not your concern. Your concern is keeping him alive long enough to answer questions about what he knows. The words hung in the air like poison gas. About what he knows, not about what happened to him. About what he knows. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Who is this patient? That's classified. What does he know that's worth killing him over? That's classified. Are you ordering me to save the life of someone you people tried to murder? Morrison stepped closer. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm ordering you to do your job, doctor. I'm ordering you to remember that you're an officer in the United States Air Force. I'm ordering you to understand that some things are bigger than one patient, bigger than one doctor's conscience, bigger than whatever idealistic notions you have about medical ethics. Elena looked at the patient, at the man whose name she didn't know, whose crime was knowing something that powerful people wanted kept secret. She thought about her daughter. Sophie was 16 now, living on base, attending the American school, dreaming about college and boys and a future that seemed limitless. Sophie, who believed her mother was a hero. Sophie, who wore her Air Force heritage like a badge of honor. What would Sophie think if her mother walked away from a dying patient? What would Sophie think if her mother participated in murder? I need a minute, Elena said. You don't have a minute. You have seconds. Make your choice, doctor. Elena pulled off her surgical gloves. The snap of latex breaking free from skin was loud in the quiet room. I choose to honor my oath. First, do no harm. This patient needs digoxin immune fab to counteract the toxicity. He needs careful monitoring and supportive care. What he doesn't need is invasive surgery that will kill him in his current condition. Morrison's face went pale with rage. You're refusing a direct order. I'm refusing to participate in whatever this is. I'm refusing to let a patient die because treating him properly interferes with someone's agenda. And I'm refusing to be complicit in what looks very much like an attempted murder. You're making a mistake that will destroy everything you've built. Elena met her eyes. I've built a career on saving lives, Colonel. Not ending them, not even when ordered to do so. She started to turn away, started to walk toward the door. Morrison's voice stopped her. His name is General Michael Hargrove. Elena froze. General Michael Hargrove. She knew that name. Everyone in the military knew that name. He was a 3-star general, former commander of logistics operations in the Middle East, recently retired under circumstances that the official press releases described as pursuing personal interest, but that the unofficial Whisper network described as forced out for asking too many questions. Questions about missing equipment, missing weapons, missing money, billions of dollars that had somehow vanished from inventory during the chaos of war. He was scheduled to testify before Congress next week, Morrison continued, about irregularities in defense contracts, about weapons shipments that never reached their destinations, about money that disappeared into shell companies and offshore accounts, about generals and contractors and politicians who got very rich while soldiers died with inadequate equipment. Elena turned slowly, and someone tried to kill him before he could testify. Someone tried to ensure that his testimony would be delayed, that he would be too sick to appear, that by the time he recovered, other events would have overtaken the news cycle and his testimony would be irrelevant. By poisoning him. Morrison said nothing, but her silence was confirmation. Elena looked at the general lying unconscious on the table, a man who had served his country for 30 years, a man who had seen corruption and chosen to expose it, a man who was dying because he had tried to do the right thing. What happens if I save him? Elena asked quietly. He testifies. The investigation proceeds. People go to prison. A lot of very powerful people lose a lot of money and influence. And what happens if I don't save him? He dies. The testimony never happens. The investigation stalls. Everything continues as it has been. And you get to keep your career, your pension, your daughter's future. It was the ultimate choice, the kind of choice that defined who you were at the deepest level. Save one man and make powerful enemies, or let him die and protect everything you had built. Elena thought about Sophie, about the college fund she had been contributing to for 16 years, about the plans they had made, about the future they had imagined. She thought about her career, 20 years of service, deployments to war zones, soldiers saved, lives preserved, a record of excellence that had earned her respect and rank and responsibility. She thought about her oath, the promise she had made when she became a doctor, to do no harm, to preserve life, to put the patient above all other considerations. And she made her choice. Prep the digoxin immune fab, she said to the nurse. Start supportive care protocols. Get me a cardiac monitor and be ready to respond to arrhythmias. We're going to save this man's life. Morrison's voice was cold as ice. You're committing professional suicide. Maybe, but I can live with that. What I can't live with is being a murderer. Elena pulled on fresh gloves and approached the table. General Hargrove's vital signs were continuing to deteriorate. BP 62 over 34. Heart rate 158. Oxygen saturation 76%. She had minutes, maybe less. Give me 2 vials of digoxin immune fab. Push it slowly. Watch for allergic reaction. The nurse prepared the medication. Elena took it and injected it into the IV line that someone had so carefully placed in the general's arm. The same IV line that had probably been used to deliver the poison that was killing him. The irony was not lost on her. Increase oxygen flow. I want set above 90%. Start a dopamine drip to support blood pressure. Get me another set of labs in 10 minutes. And someone page cardiology. I want a specialist standing by in case we need advanced intervention. The team moved into action. This was what they were trained for. This was what they did. Save lives, fight death, hold the line against the darkness that was always waiting to claim another patient. Elena watched the monitors, watched the numbers, watched for any sign that the treatment was working or failing or making things worse. Morrison was still standing on the other side of the table, still watching, still silent. You should leave, Colonel, Elena said without looking up. I need to focus on my patient, not on politics. This isn't politics, doctor. This is survival, and you just chose the wrong side. There are no sides in medicine. There's just the patient and the physician and the oath that binds us together. Morrison walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. They won't let you win this, you know. They're too powerful, too connected, too protected. All you'll accomplish is destroying yourself. Elena finally looked up. Then I'll be destroyed by doing the right thing. I can live with that ending. Morrison left, The door swung shut behind her with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a coffin closing. Elena turned back to General Hargrove, to the man whose life was in her hands, to the witness whose testimony might bring down a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. "Stay with me, General," she said softly. "Don't you dare die on my table. Too many people are counting on you." The monitors beeped their rhythmic countdown. The medications flowed through IAV lines. The machines breathed for him while his poisoned heart struggled to remember how to beat. And Elena Reeves, chief of trauma surgery officer in the United States Air Force, mother of a teenage daughter who believed in heroes, stood at the operating table and fought for a life that powerful people had decided wasn't worth saving. She fought for 3 hours. 3 hours of medications and adjustments and desperate interventions. 3 hours of watching numbers climb and fall and stabilize and crash. 3 hours of using every skill she had learned in 20 years of medicine to counteract the poison that someone had deliberately introduced into this man's body. At 0547 hours, General Hargrove's blood pressure stabilized at 96/62. At 0603 hours, his heart rate dropped to 98 beats per minute and maintained a steady rhythm. At 0621 hours, his oxygen saturation climbed to 94% and stayed there. At 0638 hours, Elena allowed herself to believe he might survive. The surgical team had worked with quiet efficiency. No one asked questions about why they were treating toxicity instead of trauma. No one commented on the unusual circumstances. They simply did their jobs, because that's what medical professionals did. They saved lives. They didn't judge. They didn't question. They treated the patient in front of them with everything they had. But Elena knew that questions were coming, knew that consequences were coming, knew that the decision she had made in this operating room would follow her for the rest of her life. She just didn't know how soon those consequences would arrive. At 0702 hours, General Hargrove opened his eyes. Elena was at his bedside immediately. He was intubated, unable to speak, but his eyes were alert, aware, terrified. "General Hargrove, you're at Ramstein Air Base. You're in the hospital. You were poisoned, but you're going to be okay. Do you understand?" He nodded slightly. His eyes searched her face, looking for answers, looking for truth, looking for some indication of whether he could trust the person standing over him. "I'm Dr. Elena Reeves. I'm the surgeon who treated you. No one is going to hurt you while you're under my care. You're safe here." It was a lie. He wasn't safe. Neither of them were safe. But sometimes patients needed to hear lies before they could handle the truth. His hand moved slightly, reaching for something. Elena took his hand and felt him squeeze weakly. Then he did something that changed everything. He used his other hand to make a gesture. Weak, trembling, but deliberate. He pointed at Elena, then at himself, then made a motion like writing. He wanted to tell her something. Something urgent enough that he was trying to communicate while intubated and barely conscious. Elena looked around the room. The nurses were busy with other tasks. The anesthesiologist was documenting the procedure. No one was paying attention to the patient's desperate attempts to communicate. She leaned close to his ear and whispered, "I'm going to ask you yes or no questions. Squeeze once for yes, twice for no. Understand, one squeeze. Are you in danger? One squeeze. Is someone in the hospital trying to kill you? One squeeze. Do you know who? One squeeze. Is it someone high-ranking? One squeeze." Elena felt her heart racing. She had suspected as much. But having it confirmed by the patient himself made it real, made it immediate, made it deadly. "Does this have to do with your congressional testimony?" One squeeze. "About missing weapons?" One squeeze. "How many people are involved? More than 5. One squeeze. More than 10. One squeeze." "Jesus," Elena breathed. "More than 20. One squeeze." She pulled back and looked at his face, at the fear in his eyes, at the desperation of a man who knew too much and had almost died for it. "I'm going to protect you," she said. "I'm going to make sure you survive to tell your story. I promise." His eyes filled with tears. Whether from gratitude or hopelessness, she couldn't tell. Then he made another gesture, pointed at Elena, then at the door, then made a pushing motion. "Run." He was telling her to run. Because whatever he knew, whatever he was involved in, whatever conspiracy had tried to kill him, it was big enough that anyone who helped him would become a target too. Elena was about to respond when the door to the recovery room burst open. Colonel Morrison entered with two military police officers. Dr. Reeves, you need to come with us, now. Elena straightened. I'm in the middle of post-operative care. My patient needs monitoring. Your patient will be transferred to another physician. You're being placed under investigation for failure to follow orders and potential breach of security protocols. On what grounds? On the grounds that you refused a direct order from a superior officer during a classified medical emergency. On the grounds that you accessed patient information without proper authorization. On the grounds that you made treatment decisions that contradicted mission parameters. Mission parameters. They were describing a medical emergency as a mission, as an operation, as something that had objectives beyond saving a life. Elena looked at General Hargrove. His eyes were wide with alarm. He was trying to sit up, trying to protect her, but the medications and the intubation kept him helpless. I saved his life, Elena said quietly. That's my job. That's what doctors do. Morrison's face was carved from ice. Your job is to follow orders. You forgot that. Now you're going to learn what happens when Air Force officers decide they know better than the chain of command. The MPs moved forward. Elena had a choice. She could resist, could make a scene, could turn this into a physical confrontation that would only make things worse. Or she could go quietly and fight this battle in a different arena. She chose the latter. I'm coming voluntarily, she said. No need for restraints. But as she walked toward the door, she turned back to look at General Hargrove one more time. He was watching her. And even through the fear and the drugs and the weakness, she could see something else in his eyes. Hope. Someone had finally chosen his life over their orders. Someone had finally put conscience over career. Someone had finally decided that the truth was worth fighting for. Elena gave him the smallest nod, a promise that this wasn't over, that she hadn't saved his life just to abandon him to the people who wanted him dead. Then the MPS escorted her out of the recovery room down the corridor, away from the patient she had fought 3 hours to save. As they walked through the hospital, Elena noticed something. Staff members were watching her, some with confusion, some with sympathy, some with the kind of respect that came from seeing someone stand up for what was right even when it cost them everything. They took her to an office in the administrative wing, small, windowless, with a table and 2 chairs, an interrogation room pretending to be a conference space. Morrison sat across from her. The MP stood outside the door. You've destroyed your career, Morrison said. You know that, don't you? I saved a man's life. That's not destruction. That's the job I signed up for. The job you signed up for includes following orders, includes understanding that sometimes the mission is more important than one individual, includes accepting that you don't have all the information and trusting that your superiors are making decisions based on intelligence you're not cleared to access. Elena leaned forward. Tell me something, Colonel. When you took your oath as a physician, what did it say? Did it say first do no harm unless ordered otherwise? Did it say preserve life unless it's politically inconvenient? Did it say be a doctor except when it conflicts with being a soldier? Morrison's jaw tightened. It said serve the greater good, and sometimes the greater good requires difficult choices. Murder isn't a difficult choice. It's an impossible choice, at least for people who still have a conscience. General Hargrove's testimony could destabilize ongoing operations, could compromise intelligence assets, could damage relationships with allied governments, could result in the deaths of soldiers who are depending on the support systems that his testimony would disrupt. Elena shook her head. That's the rationalization. Here's the reality. General Hargrove knows where $50 billion in weapons and equipment disappeared to. He knows which generals and contractors and politicians got rich selling American military hardware to the highest bidder. He knows that while soldiers were dying with inadequate body armor and faulty equipment, someone was making a fortune shipping that equipment to arms dealers and warlords, and anyone else who could pay the price. Morrison went very still. How do you know that? Because he told me. While he was barely conscious, while he was fighting for his life, he managed to communicate enough that I understand what's at stake. And Colonel, what's at stake isn't national security. It's the criminal enterprise that's been using national security as a cover for the biggest theft in military history. For the first time, Morrison looked uncertain. You're speculating. I'm connecting dots, the poisoning, the delay in treatment, the pressure to let him die, the classification of his identity. It all adds up to one conclusion: someone very powerful wants General Hargrove dead before he can testify, and they were willing to use military medicine as their murder weapon. Morrison stood up and walked to the door. She spoke without turning around. You'll be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Your security clearances will be suspended. You'll be confined to base housing. You will not attempt to contact General Hargrove or anyone involved in his case. You will not discuss this incident with anyone. You will not access any classified systems or information. Is that clear? Crystal clear. Morrison opened the door. The MPs entered. Escort Dr. Reeves to her quarters. Post a guard. She's not to leave without authorization. As Elena was being led away, she had one final question. Colonel, answer me honestly. If you were the patient on that table, if someone had poisoned you and told me to let you die, what would you want me to do? Morrison finally turned to look at her, and for just a moment, Elena saw something in her superior officer's eyes, something that looked almost like regret. I would want you to follow orders, Morrison said softly, because the alternative is too dangerous for everyone involved. But Elena had already made her choice. And as they escorted her back to her quarters, as the dawn light broke over Ramstein Air Base, as another day began for the thousands of service members who trusted that their leaders had their best interests at heart, Elena Reeves understood something fundamental. She had just become the second person who knew too much. And the people who had tried to murder General Hargrove weren't going to stop with one failed attempt. They were going to come for her next. The quarters they confined her to were the same quarters she had lived in for 6 years. Same furniture, same view of the flight line, same photographs on the wall of Sophie, at various ages smiling the smile of a child who believed her mother could fix anything. But everything felt different now. Elena stood at the window and watched aircraft take off and land in the early morning light. C-100s hauling cargo to war zones. Medevac helicopters ready to bring broken bodies back for repair. Fighter jets screaming into the sky with the confidence of invincibility. The machinery of war operating with perfect efficiency. And somewhere in that hospital, General Michael Hargrove was lying in a bed still alive because one doctor had refused to let him die. How long would he stay alive now that Elena wasn't there to protect him? The guard outside her door was a young airman, maybe 22, with the kind of face that still showed surprise at being part of something serious. He had been told to keep her inside. He probably didn't know why. Probably didn't care. Orders were orders. Elena checked her watch. 0847 hours. Sophie would be in second period by now. American history, if she remembered the schedule correctly. Learning about democracy and constitutional rights and the idea that in America, the rule of law protected everyone equally. Beautiful lies that children needed to believe. Elena's phone was still in her pocket. They hadn't confiscated it yet. Probably an oversight. Or perhaps they assumed she understood the consequences of trying to contact anyone. She pulled it out and stared at the screen. One call. That's all it would take. One call to Sophie to warn her. One call to a lawyer to protect herself. One call to a journalist to expose what was happening. But any call would be monitored. Any call would be traced. Any call would give them evidence that she was violating the direct order not to discuss the incident. She put the phone away. Patience. She needed patience, and information, and allies. The problem was she didn't know who to trust anymore. At 10:34 hours, there was a knock at the door. Elena tensed. Visitors meant interrogation. Or worse. But when the door opened, it wasn't Morrison or the MPs. It was Major James Chen. Chen was 41, a military investigator with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Elena had met him 3 years ago during an inquiry into medical supply theft at the base. He had been thorough, professional, and surprisingly sympathetic to the pressures that medical personnel faced. They had worked together on the investigation, had discovered that a contractor was diverting medications to the black market, had ensured that the responsible parties were prosecuted. Chen had a reputation for being incorruptible, for following evidence wherever it led, regardless of who it implicated. If anyone might be an ally, it was him. Dr. Reeves, he said formally, may I come in? The guard stepped aside. Chen entered. The door closed behind him. Elena waited. Let him make the first move. Give her some indication of whether he was here and friend or interrogator. Chen walked to the window and looked out at the flight line. He was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen a medical officer do. I'm still deciding which, Elena replied. You saved General Hargrove's life. That's my job. Against direct orders. Following those orders would have killed him. Chen turned to face her. His expression was carefully neutral. I'm here unofficially. This conversation is not being recorded. What I tell you does not leave this room. Understood? Elena nodded. General Hargrove is alive and stable. He's been transferred to a secure ward with round-the-clock monitoring. Colonel Morrison has been reassigned as his primary physician. Elena's blood went cold. Morrison tried to kill him. Morrison followed orders. There's a difference. Not from where the patient is lying. Chen sat down on the edge of Elena's desk. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from seeing too much corruption and not being able to stop it all. I've been investigating the Blackwater Defense Contracts case for 8 months. It's the biggest procurement fraud in military history. $50 billion in weapons vehicles and equipment that were supposed to go to Allied forces in the Middle East, except most of it never arrived. It was diverted to arms dealers, sold to the highest bidder, ended up in the hands of warlords and terrorists and anyone else who could pay. And General Hargrove knows who was responsible. Hargrove doesn't just know. He has documentation, financial records, shipping manifests, communications between generals and contractors, names, dates, amounts, everything you would need to prosecute the people at the top of the pyramid. Elena felt sick. How many people are involved? Dozens at the operational level, but the real power: 3 generals, 2 defense contractors, and a senator who sits on the Armed Services Committee and made sure that oversight was minimal and questions were rare. $50 billion, Elena whispered, while soldiers died because they didn't have proper equipment. Hargrove's unit in Iraq had a 63% casualty rate, higher than any other logistics unit in theater. You know why? Because the body armor that was supposed to protect them was sold to someone else. The vehicles that were supposed to be armored were shipped with substandard materials. The night vision equipment that was supposed to keep them safe was diverted before it ever reached the warehouse. Chen's voice was tight with controlled rage. 63% casualties. Not because of enemy action. Because of criminal negligence by people who were supposed to be on their side. Elena walked to the window, looked out at the young airmen and soldiers and sailors walking across the base. Kids in uniform who trusted that their leaders would protect them. Hargrove was going to testify. Next week, congressional hearing, public session. He was going to name names and provide documentation and blow the whole thing wide open. So someone tried to kill him before he could talk. Chen nodded. The aviation accident was staged. He was drugged, placed in a small aircraft. The aircraft was set to autopilot and crashed into a remote area. The plan was for the crash to kill him or for the injuries to be severe enough that he would die before reaching medical care. What they didn't count on was the pilot surviving long enough to activate an emergency beacon. What they didn't count on was a rescue team reaching him in time. And what they definitely didn't count on was you refusing to follow orders. Elena turned to face him. Who gave the order to let him die? That's what I'm trying to find out. The chain of command on this goes high, very high, above Morrison, above the base commander. We're talking about flag officers with access to classified operations and the resources to make problems disappear. And now I'm a problem. You're a very big problem. Because you saved the witness they tried to eliminate. Because you documented the digoxin toxicity. Because you questioned orders in front of witnesses. You're a liability that they can't afford to ignore. Elena sat down heavily in her chair. What happens now? Chen pulled out his phone, checked to make sure it was off, then pulled out the battery for good measure. Now you have a choice. You can accept administrative leave, keep your head down, let them discredit you as emotionally unstable or professionally incompetent, and hope that they're satisfied with destroying your career instead of destroying you. Or you can fight back. Fight back how? By helping me build a case, by testifying about what happened, by being the second witness who can corroborate Hargrove's story from a completely different angle, by showing that this conspiracy includes attempted murder in a military hospital. Elena looked at the photographs of Sophie on her wall. If I testify, they'll come after my daughter. If you don't testify, they'll come after you anyway. The only question is whether you go down fighting or whether you go down quietly. It was a brutal calculus. Risk everything to fight corruption, or surrender everything and hope they showed mercy. What about Hargrove? Is he safe? Chen's expression darkened. That's why I'm here. I need your help. I'm confined to quarters. I can get you out, but you need to understand the risk. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war on some of the most powerful people in the military. They will use every resource they have to destroy you. Your career, your reputation, your freedom, your family. Nothing will be off limits. Elena thought about the young airman outside her door, thought about Sophie in her history class, thought about General Hargrove fighting to stay alive so he could tell the truth, thought about the 63% casualty rate in a unit that died because someone had stolen their armor. What do you need me to do? Chen allowed himself a small smile. Right now, Hargrove is stable but vulnerable. Morrison is in charge of his care. She has access to his medications, his chart, his room. If someone wants to finish the job, she's in the perfect position to make it happen. You think she'll try again? I think she's following orders, and I think those orders haven't changed. Hargrove needs to die before the congressional hearing. That gives them 5 days. So we need to protect him. We need to move him, get him out of that hospital and into a secure location where the people who want him dead can't reach him. But that requires medical supervision. Someone who knows his condition, knows his treatment protocol, and can keep him alive during transport. Elena understood. You want me to help you extract a patient from a military hospital in violation of orders and move him to a location that I'm guessing is not officially sanctioned. That's exactly what I want. That's court-martial territory. That's prison time. That's justice, Chen said quietly. That's choosing the oath you took as a doctor over the machinery that's trying to use you as a weapon. Elena walked to her closet and pulled out her medical bag, the one she kept packed for emergencies, the one that held everything she might need to keep someone alive in the field. Wenhuo, tonight 0200 hours. There's a shift change in the hospital, minimal staff. Security is thinnest between 0200 and 0300. We'll have a 20-minute window. How do we get him out? Leave that to me. Your job is to keep him alive once we're mobile. Can you do that? Elena thought about the 3 hours she had spent fighting to save Hargrove's life. Thought about the oath she had taken. Thought about the line she had already crossed by refusing orders. Yes, I can do that. Chen stood and moved toward the door. Pack light. Bring only what you need medically, no personal items. Nothing that can be traced. Once we leave this base, we're ghosts. Understood. Understood. He paused with his hand on the door handle. Dr. Reeves, I need to know you're committed to this. Once we start, there's no backing out, no changing your mind. We either succeed or we spend the rest of our lives in military prison. Maybe worse. Elena looked at the photographs of Sophie one more time, memorized her daughter's smile, wondered if she would ever see it again. I'm committed. Chen nodded and left. The door closed. The guard resumed his position. Elena sat down and began to plan. Medical supplies she would need, medications for cardiac support, equipment for monitoring, contingencies for every complication she could imagine. She was about to commit treason, about to violate every regulation and order and protocol that she had followed for 20 years. And she had never been more certain that she was doing the right thing. At 14:22 hours, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They know. Get out now. Elena stared at the message, then deleted it, then removed the battery from her phone. Someone was helping her. Someone in the system. Someone who had access to information about what was being planned. But who? She looked at the door, at the young guard standing outside, at the window that offered no escape, at the walls that had become a prison. Then she began to prepare. At 1800 hours, a dinner was delivered by a different guard, older with the kind of face that suggested he had seen enough corruption to be disgusted by it, but not enough power to stop it. He set the tray down on her desk. Then he spoke quietly. Your daughter is safe. She's been moved to secure housing off base. Don't try to contact her. Don't worry about her. Just focus on staying alive. Before Elena could respond, he was gone. Someone was protecting Sophie. Someone with resources and authority. Someone who knew that the safest thing for her daughter was to be as far away from this situation as possible. Elena looked at the food, didn't touch it, couldn't eat. Instead, she spent the evening checking and rechecking her medical supplies, planning for every contingency, preparing for a mission that would either save lives or end hers. At 23:45 hours, the lights on the base began their scheduled dimming. Night operations mode, reduced visibility to make it harder for potential enemies to target the facility. Elena changed into dark clothing, civilian clothes that wouldn't stand out, packed her medical bag with care, double-checked every item. At 01:57 hours, she heard a soft knock at her window. She opened the curtain to find Chen outside, dressed in dark tactical clothing. He held a finger to his lips. Elena opened the window as quietly as possible. Chen helped her through, then they moved in silence along the side of the building, staying in shadows, avoiding security cameras. The guard at her door never noticed. They made their way across the base using paths that Chen clearly knew well, avoiding patrols, timing their movements to coincide with the rotation of security personnel. They reached the hospital at 02:08 hours. Chen used a security badge to access a service entrance. They moved through maintenance corridors, past supply rooms, through areas of the hospital that most people never saw. At 02:14 hours, they reached the secure ward where Hargrove was being kept. Chen disabled the security camera with a device that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. They had 90 seconds before the system would flag the disruption. They entered Hargrove's room. The general was awake, alert. When he saw Elena, his eyes filled with recognition and something that looked like hope. We're getting you out of here, Elena said quietly as she disconnected his monitors with practiced efficiency. Stay quiet. Do exactly what we tell you. Understand, he nodded. Chen produced a wheelchair. Together, they transferred Hargrove from the bed. He was weak but conscious. Elena grabbed his chart and his medications, everything they would need to keep him alive. They moved back into the corridor, 60 seconds before security would respond to the camera disruption. But as they turned the corner, they came face to face with Colonel Morrison. She was standing in the corridor, blocking their path. Her face was pale but determined. I can't let you do this, she said. Chen's hand went to his sidearm. Morrison raised her hands. I'm not armed. I'm not going to stop you physically, but I need you to understand what you're doing. The people who want him dead, they're not going to stop. They're going to hunt you. They're going to find you. And they're going to make sure that everyone you care about pays the price for this choice. Elena stepped forward. Then help us. Tell us who gave the order. Tell us who's running this conspiracy. Help us stop them instead of helping them murder witnesses. Morrison's eyes were wet with tears. I can't. They have my son. He's deployed in Afghanistan. They told me if I don't cooperate, he'll have an accident, a training incident, something that will look like bad luck, but will really be murder. Elena felt something break inside her chest. So you were going to let Hargrove die to save your son? I was going to let a stranger die to save my child. And if you were in my position, you would have done the same thing. It was true. Sophie was Elena's world. If someone threatened her daughter, Elena would burn the world down to keep her safe. But that didn't make it right. Help us now, Elena said. Tell us who's in charge. Give us names. Let us stop them before they hurt anyone else's children. Morrison was shaking. I don't know names. I only know that the orders come from someone with stars on their shoulders and friends in Congress, and enough power that questioning them is suicide. Chen checked his watch. We're out of time. Make a choice, Colonel. Step aside or stop us. But do it now. Morrison looked at Hargrove, at the man she had been ordered to kill, at the witness who represented the last chance to expose a massive criminal conspiracy. Then she stepped aside. If they ask, I'll say you overpowered me, that you were armed, that I had no choice. Thank you, Elena said. Don't thank me. I'm still a coward. I'm just a coward who can't watch another murder happen right in front of me. They moved past her down the corridor, through the maintenance areas, out into the night. A van was waiting in the service area, unmarked, dark. Chen loaded Hargrove into the back. Elena climbed in beside him and immediately began checking his vital signs. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they won't look," Chen replied. "Somewhere we can keep him safe until the hearing." The van started moving, away from the hospital, away from the base, away from the life Elena had built over 20 years of service. As they drove through the German countryside, Elena monitored Hargrove's condition. His heart rate was elevated from the stress of movement. His blood pressure was lower than ideal, but he was stable. He reached out and took her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was rough from intubation. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," Elena replied, "because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror anymore." He squeezed her hand. "They're going to destroy you for this." "Maybe, but at least I'll be destroyed for doing the right thing." The van drove through the night, away from the military base that had been her home, away from the career that had defined her, away from everything familiar and safe, towards something unknown, something dangerous, something that might get them all killed, but also towards something important: truth, justice, accountability, the things that were supposed to matter in a society governed by laws, the things that were supposed to be protected by people in uniform, the things that Elena Reeves had just committed treason to defend. As the miles passed and the night grew darker, Elena thought about Sophie, about her daughter who was somewhere safe, protected by people she didn't know for reasons she couldn't understand yet. Someday Elena would explain it to her, would tell her about the choice between following orders and following conscience, about the night her mother became a fugitive to save a stranger's life. Would Sophie understand? Would she forgive? Would she be proud or ashamed? Elena didn't know. But she knew that she had made the only choice she could live with, and that would have to be enough. The safe house was not what Elena expected. She had imagined something from a spy thriller. Underground, bunker, high-tech security, armed guards and blast doors. Instead, Chen brought them to a farmhouse 40 kilometers outside Kaiserslautern. Old stone walls, tiled roof, a barn that looked like it had been standing since before World War II. The kind of place that tourists photographed and locals ignored. Perfect camouflage. They arrived at 0347 hours. The van pulled into the barn and Chen closed the doors behind them before turning on any lights. Standard operational security. Never reveal your position. Elena helped Hargrove out of the van and into the farmhouse. He was exhausted from the journey, his body still fighting the effects of the dig oxen poisoning. But he was alive and conscious and determined. The interior of the farmhouse was sparse but functional. A kitchen with a wood stove, a living area with furniture that had seen better decades, 2 bedrooms upstairs, no television, no internet, no connection to the outside world except for whatever secure communications Chen had arranged. "Who owns this place?" Elena asked as she settled Hargrove onto a bed in the downstairs bedroom. "Someone who owes me a favor," Chen replied. "Someone who understands that sometimes the law and justice are not the same thing." He didn't elaborate. Elena didn't push. She focused on her patient, took his vital signs, administered the medications he needed, set up a makeshift monitoring system using portable equipment from her medical bag. BP 92/58, heart rate 96, oxygen saturation 93%. Not optimal, but stable. He would survive, at least for now. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. Chen was checking the windows, making sure the curtains were secure. "The congressional hearing is in 4 days. We need to keep him alive and functional until then. After that, once his testimony is public record, killing him becomes pointless. The truth will be out. And you think they'll just give up?" "I think they'll shift to damage control, discrediting his testimony, claiming he's mentally unstable, questioning his motives. But they won't kill him. Too much attention, too many questions." Elena wanted to believe that, but she had seen what these people were capable of, had watched them try to murder a 3-star general in a military hospital, had seen Morrison's terror when they threatened her son. "What about Sophie?" Elena asked quietly. "You said she was safe. How safe?" Chen pulled out a phone, not his normal phone, a burner, encrypted, untraceable. "Your daughter is with a woman named Sarah Webb, civilian contractor, former CIA. She specializes in protective custody for witnesses and their families. Sophie thinks she's on a school trip, special program for military dependents. She doesn't know about any of this. Does she know I'm in trouble? She knows you had to leave suddenly for an emergency. She thinks you're on a medical deployment. She's worried but not panicked. Sarah is good at her job. She'll keep Sophie calm and safe. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes but refused to let them fall. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford, not now, not when lives depended on her staying focused. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this, not by a long shot. Chen's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and his expression darkened. What is it? Elena asked. Morrison was found dead an hour ago, apparent suicide, hanged herself in her quarters. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. No, she wouldn't. She had a son. She was protecting her son. Which is exactly why they killed her. She knew too much. She had become unreliable. And now she's a convenient scapegoat for Hargrove's disappearance. They'll say she helped you escape out of guilt, that the pressure drove her to suicide. Case closed. Elena felt sick. Morrison had been following orders to protect her child, had been trapped in an impossible situation, had finally shown a shred of conscience by letting them pass, and they had murdered her for it. Her son, Elena said. Is he safe? Chen's silence was answer enough. Jesus Christ, Elena breathed. They killed him too. I.e. the attack in Afghanistan, 3 hours after Morrison's death. Him and 4 other soldiers. They'll call it enemy action. No one will question it. Hargrove had been listening from the bed. His voice was weak but clear. That's how they work. They don't just eliminate the problem. They eliminate anyone connected to the problem. Anyone who might ask questions. Anyone who might become a liability. Elena turned to look at him. At this man whose conscience had made him a target, whose decision to tell the truth had started a chain reaction of death. How many people have died because of what you know? 7 that I'm aware of, probably more that I don't know about. Whistleblowers, investigators, journalists, people who got too close to the truth. And you still want to testify? Hargrove met her eyes. His were hard as flint. More than ever, because every person they kill is another reason why this needs to stop. Another reason why the truth has to come out. Another reason why I can't let them win. Chen was typing on his laptop. Secure connection, encrypted channels. We have a problem. Morrison's death changes the timeline. They're going to accelerate their efforts to find us. Every law enforcement agency in Germany is going to be looking for an escaped patient and the 2 service members who kidnapped him. We didn't kidnap him, Elena protested. That's what they're calling it. Kidnapping a military patient. Theft of government property. Unauthorized removal of a witness in a federal investigation. They've issued a manhunt order. Interpol has been notified. Our faces are going to be on every watch list in Europe. Elena felt the walls closing in. So what do? We move up the timeline. The congressional hearing is in 4 days, but there's a preliminary deposition scheduled for tomorrow. Closed session, just the committee members and the witness. If we can get Hargrove to that deposition, he can provide his testimony under oath. It becomes official record. After that, killing him doesn't stop the truth from coming out. How do we get him from Germany to Washington, D.C. in less than 24 hours while every police force in Europe is looking for us? Chen smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. Very carefully. Over the next hour, Chen laid out the plan. It was insane. It relied on multiple points of failure. It required help from people Elena didn't know and had no reason to trust. It was also their only chance. They would move at dawn, drive to a private airfield owned by a logistics contractor who had worked with Chen on previous investigations. The contractor owed favors and hated corruption. He would provide a cargo plane. No flight plan, no passenger manifest. Just a delivery run that happened to include 3 unscheduled passengers. The plane would fly to a NATO base in the UK. From there, a military transport would take them to Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington. Official orders. Classified mission. The kind of thing that happened all the time in the shadowy world of intelligence operations. By the time anyone realized what had happened, Hargrove would be in front of the congressional committee testifying under oath, protected by cameras and witnesses and the full weight of public scrutiny. That was the theory. The reality was that a dozen things could go wrong. The contractor could be compromised. The flight could be intercepted. The orders could be countermanded. They could be arrested the moment they landed in the UK. But it was a plan. And a plan was better than sitting in a farmhouse waiting for a kill team to find them. Elena checked Hargrove's condition again. He needed rest, needed time to recover, needed at least another week of careful monitoring before he should be traveling. But they didn't have a week. They had hours. "Can you do this?" she asked him. "Can you survive a flight across the Atlantic in your condition?" "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice." Hargrove struggled to sit up. Elena helped him adjusting the pillows to support his back. "Doctor, I've been running from these people for 8 months. I've watched colleagues die. I've watched investigators get reassigned. I've watched evidence disappear. I've watched a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of government operate with impunity because everyone is too scared to stand up and say, 'This is wrong.'" His voice gained strength as he spoke. "You risked everything to save my life. Major Chen is risking his career to protect me. Colonel Morrison died because she showed one moment of conscience. If I don't testify, if I don't finish what I started, then all of that was for nothing. So yes, I can survive a flight across the Atlantic. I can survive whatever I need to survive to make sure the truth comes out." Elena nodded. She understood. This was bigger than one patient now, bigger than one doctor's oath. This was about whether truth and justice still mattered in a world where power could eliminate anyone who threatened it. "Then we'll get you there," she said. "I promise." At 05:23 hours, Chen's laptop chimed with an incoming message. He read it and his expression went from concern to alarmed. "What?" Elena asked. "Someone accessed the personnel files at Ramstein, downloaded information about everyone involved in Hargrove's case, including you, including Morrison, including me. When, 30 minutes ago, from a terminal in the Pentagon, the heart of American military power, someone in that building was tracking them. Someone with high-level access and the authority to use it. They know we're together," Elena said. "They know we're planning something. Worse than that, they know your daughter's location." Elena's blood went cold. "How you said she was with a professional. You said she was safe." "She is, but the database that tracks dependent housing assignments was accessed at the same time. Whoever did this knows where Sophie is supposed to be. They might not know she's been moved, but they're looking." Elena grabbed Chen's arm. "We need to move her again. Now, before they figure out she's not where the database says she is." Chen was already typing, sending encrypted messages to people Elena couldn't see. "I'm on it. Sarah will relocate within the hour. New identity, new location, complete blackout. They won't find her." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise that Sarah is one of the best protection specialists in the business. If anyone can keep Sophie safe, it's her." Elena wanted to scream, wanted to throw things, wanted to somehow reach through space and time and pull her daughter into her arms and never let go. But she couldn't. All she could do was trust strangers to protect the most important person in her world. Hargrove was watching her, understanding the terror that came with having your child threatened. "They'll use her to control you," he said quietly. "They'll tell you that if you don't surrender, if you don't abandon me, something will happen to her. That's how they work. They find what you love, and they threaten it until you comply." "I know. And you need to know that if it comes to that choice, if they offer to trade your daughter's safety for my death, you should take the deal." Elena looked at him sharply. "No." "Yes, because your daughter is innocent. Because she doesn't deserve to be punished for your conscience. Because one girl's life is worth more than one old general's testimony. It's not about worth. It's about right and wrong. If I let them murder you to save Sophie, what kind of world am I protecting her for? A world where truth doesn't matter, where justice is just a word, where power can kill anyone who challenges it. That's not a world worth saving." Hargrove smiled sadly. "You sound like me 8 months ago, before I understood what I was up against, before I learned that idealism is a luxury that gets people killed. Then maybe it's time someone paid that price. Maybe it's time someone said, 'This far and no further.' Maybe it's time we stopped letting fear control our choices." Chen closed his laptop. "Philosophical debate later. Survival now. We move in 30 minutes. Pack only what we can carry. Leave everything else. Once we walk out that door, we're committed. No turning back. Everyone clear. Elena and Hargrove both nodded. The next 30 minutes passed in tense preparation. Chen checked weapons and equipment. Elena packed medical supplies and Hargrove's medications. Hargrove rested and gathered what strength he had left. At 05:53 hours, they loaded into the van. Chen drove. Elena sat in the back with Hargrove monitoring his vital signs, ready to intervene if his condition deteriorated. The German countryside rolled past in the pre-dawn darkness. Fields and forests. Small villages still sleeping. A world that had no idea that three fugitives were driving through it, racing against time and power, and the machinery of death. They reached the private airfield at 06:47 hours. It was small, just 2 runways and a handful of buildings. The kind of place that handled cargo flights and private jets and the occasional medical transport. A man was waiting by one of the hangars, 50-something with the weathered face of someone who had spent his life in aviation. He didn't smile when Chen approached. "You're late," he said in accented English. "We had complications." "I heard. Morrison's death is all over the news. They're calling it a tragedy, saying she was stressed about a patient she lost." "She didn't lose a patient. She was murdered." The man's expression hardened. "Then you'd better make damn sure her death means something. My plane is fueled and ready. Flight plan is logged as cargo delivery to RAF Mildenhall. You'll be in the cargo bay, no passenger seats, no amenities, just you and whatever boxes we can stack around you for cover." "How long is the flight?" 2 hours, maybe less if the winds are favorable. You'll land at Mildenhall, transferred to a C-17 that's waiting there. From there, you're someone else's problem." Chen shook his hand. "Thank you for this." "Don't thank me. Just make sure the general tells his story. Make sure people know what's being done in their name. Make sure Morrison and her son didn't die for nothing." They loaded into the cargo plane. It was exactly as advertised. No seats, no comfort, just metal floor and cargo netting and the cold efficiency of a vehicle designed to move things, not people. Elena helped Hargrove settle against some shipping crates, checked his vital signs. BP 88/54, heart rate 102. He was struggling. The stress and movement and fear were taking their toll. "Hang on," she told him. "Just a few more hours, then you can rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead," he replied, "which might be sooner than later if my heart keeps this up." "Your heart is going to be fine. I'm not going to let you die after everything we've been through." The plane's engines roared to life. The cargo bay vibrated with mechanical power. Chen secured the cargo netting and sat down beside them. "Once we're airborne, we're safe until we land. No one can touch us at 30,000 feet. It was small comfort, but it was something. The plane taxied to the runway, paused, then accelerated with the kind of force that pressed them back against the cargo. Elena watched through a small window as the ground fell away, as Germany became a patchwork of fields and towns, as they climbed into the early morning sky. For the first time in 24 hours, she allowed herself to breathe. They had escaped. They were in the air. They were moving towards safety and testimony, and the chance to make all of this suffering mean something. But as they crossed into French airspace, Chen's backup phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it and went pale. "What?" Elena asked. Chen showed her the screen. 6 words: C-17 at Mildenhall has been recalled. Elena felt her stomach drop. "What does that mean?" "It means someone knows we're coming. It means they've eliminated our ride to Washington. It means when we land at Mildenhall, we'll be trapped at a British airbase with no way forward and no way back. Can we divert, land somewhere else? And go where we're 3 fugitives with no papers, no authorization, no legitimate reason for being wherever we land. The moment we touch down anywhere, we're at the mercy of whoever controls that airfield." Hargrove was listening. His breathing was labored, but his mind was sharp. "There's another option." "What?" "We don't land at Mildenhall. We continue to the U.S., fly directly to American airspace." Chen shook his head. "This plane doesn't have the range. We'd run out of fuel over the Atlantic. Then we refuel midair. With what tanker, we'd need authorization, flight plans, coordination with air traffic control. We can't just randomly request a mid-air refueling without alerting everyone to our position. Hargrove's smile was grim. I used to run logistics. Remember, I know every cargo route, every tanker schedule, every unofficial arrangement that keeps the military supplied around the world. There's a KC-135 refueling tanker that does a regular run between Germany and the Azores. It passes through this airspace in approximately 90 minutes. If we can intercept it, if we can convince the pilot to help us, we can refuel and continue to the U.S. That's insane, Chen said. That's our only option, Hargrove replied. Elena looked between them. How do we convince a tanker pilot to refuel an unscheduled cargo plane in the middle of the Atlantic? We tell him the truth, Hargrove said. We tell him that a 3-star general is on board, that he's trying to reach Washington to testify about the biggest corruption case in military history, that powerful people are trying to stop him. We appeal to his conscience and hope that there are still people in uniform who believe the oath they took actually means something. It was a long shot. It relied on a stranger's conscience and courage. It meant trusting that one more person would choose right over orders. But they had no other options. Chen pulled out his radio, found the military frequency, and began broadcasting. This is November 7-4 Charlie to any tanker aircraft in grid Oscar Delta 37. We have an emergency situation and require immediate refueling assistance. Repeat, this is November 7-4 Charlie requesting emergency refueling. Over. Static filled the cargo bay. Elena counted her heartbeats, waited for a response that might not come. Then after what felt like forever, a voice crackled through the speaker. November 7-4 Charlie, this is Titan 6-2. I copy your emergency request. What is the nature of your situation? Over. Chen looked at Hargrove. The general nodded. Chen keyed the microphone. Titan 6-2, be advised. I am transporting General Michael Hargrove to Washington, D.C. for congressional testimony regarding defense contract fraud. We are being actively pursued by individuals who wish to prevent that testimony. Our scheduled landing at Mildenhall has been compromised. We request emergency refueling to continue to CONUS. Over. Long pause, then, November 7-4, Charlie, did you say General Hargrove? The General Hargrove who's supposed to testify about Blackwater defense. Over. Affirmative, Titan 6-2. He is on board this aircraft and needs to reach Washington before the preliminary deposition tomorrow morning. Over. Another pause. Elena could imagine the tanker pilot processing this information, calculating the risks, deciding whether to believe them. Finally, November 7-4, Charlie. I read about that case. I served in Iraq, lost friends because of faulty equipment. If General Hargrove is really trying to hold those bastards accountable, then yes, I'll refuel you. Transmitting rendezvous coordinates now. Titan 6-2 out. Chen looked at Elena and Hargrove with something like hope in his eyes. We might actually make this work. The refueling took 45 minutes. The cargo plane and the tanker met over the North Atlantic, connected through a boom system that Elena watched through the window with her heart in her throat. One mistake, one miscalculation, and both aircraft would crash into the ocean. But the pilots were professionals. They completed the refueling with smooth precision. As they disconnected, the tanker pilot's voice came through one more time. November 7-4, Charlie, you're topped off and good to go. Give them hell, General. A lot of us are counting on you. Titan 6-2 out. The tanker peeled away, disappeared into the clouds, and the cargo plane continued west, toward America, toward testimony, toward truth. Elena checked Hargrove's vital signs again. He was exhausted. His body was running on adrenaline and determination. But he was alive. Almost there, she told him. Just hold on a little longer. He squeezed her hand. Thank you for everything, for refusing to let me die, for risking everything to get me here, for being proof that conscience still exists in the military. Don't thank me until you've testified, until this is over, until we've actually won. We've already won, Hargrove said quietly, because we chose truth over fear. We chose right over orders. We chose to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. That's victory regardless of how this ends. Elena wanted to believe that, wanted to think that doing the right thing was its own reward. But she thought about Morrison hanging from a rope, about Morrison's son dying in an explosion, about Sophie hiding somewhere under a false identity because her mother had refused to commit murder. Victory felt like a word from a different language, a concept that belonged to people who hadn't paid the price for conscience. The plane flew west through the afternoon. Hours passed. Elena dozed fitfully. Chen monitored communications. Hargrove rested and prepared for the ordeal ahead. At 17:34 hours local time, they entered American airspace. Chen's radio crackled with an official transmission. Unidentified cargo aircraft, this is Potomac Approach Control. You are not on our flight plan. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Over. Chen keyed the microphone. Potomac Approach, this is November 7-4 Charlie. We are carrying General Michael Hargrove to provide emergency testimony before Congress. Request priority clearance to land at Andrews Air Force Base. Over. Silence. Then November 7-4, Charlie standby. More silence. Elena imagined frantic conversations happening in air traffic control, calls being made, confirmations being sought, decisions being debated at levels above the pay grade of anyone in that tower. Finally, November 7-4 Charlie, you are cleared to land at Andrews Air Force Base. Vector heading 270. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. Be advised, security personnel will meet you on the ground. Over. Copy that, Potomac. November 7-4 Charlie acknowledges. Out. Chen looked at Elena. This is it. We're landing on American soil. After this, we're either heroes or traitors. No middle ground. I can live with either, Elena said, as long as Hargrove gets to testify. The plane descended through late afternoon clouds. Through the window, Elena could see the landscape of Maryland and Virginia. The Pentagon in the distance, the Capitol building, the monuments to American ideals, truth, justice, accountability, ideals that were about to be tested. The plane touched down at 18:09 hours. As the engines powered down, Elena could see vehicles surrounding them. Security personnel, armed MPS, officers with rank insignia that suggested serious authority. This was the moment, the point of no return. The cargo bay door opened. Light flooded in. A voice called out, General Hargrove, Dr. Reeves, Major Chen, please exit the aircraft with your hands visible. You are being detained pending investigation. Chen helped Hargrove to his feet. Elena supported the general from the other side. Together, the three of them walked out of the cargo bay and into the waiting arms of military security. As they were separated and placed in different vehicles, Elena caught one last glimpse of Hargrove. He was smiling, because he had made it, against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against a conspiracy that had killed to keep him silent. He had survived to tell his story, and tomorrow the world would hear the truth. Whether anyone would listen, whether anyone would care, whether justice would actually be served was still uncertain. But the truth would be told, and sometimes that had to be enough.